All right, here we go. So good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Jewel Martin. I'm the CEO and the instructor of Jumpstart with Jewel, where we teach and we tutor adolescent and adult students needing assistance in math or reading. Any students that need assistance, especially those, we cater to those that have special needs such as autism or ADHD. And we've been working the past couple of times I've been on here. Hey, on Facebook, how are you? I can't see your name, but I'm glad you're watching. I'm just doing a review before I go to the next topic when I come on tomorrow with fractions. I just wanted to review one more time. I came on, I did a live last week about adding fractions with unlike denominators, and then yesterday we did subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So I just wanted to do a review, come back and make sure it's crystal clear. And if anybody had any questions or anything, you could put it in the chat. I encourage you to share this out. If you have kids or you know someone that has children that are doing fractions now, or even for an adult that is working on fractions, if they're preparing for an entrance exam, if they're preparing for their GED, any type of test where they know there's going to be fractions, this will be a good lesson for them, especially when it comes to adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So some of the information I've already put on the screen. Let me just write my first fraction that we're going to do together. And the past couple of sessions we've talked about adding and subtracting fractions, and how one of the things that's most important when you're doing fractions, I cannot stress this to you enough. Hello there on Periscope, how are you? I cannot stress this enough. You must know your multiplication facts. You must know your multiplication facts, or what we used to call timetables. You must know them. It's important. Some children nowadays, they try to get around it. They don't want to memorize it. But the best way to do the fractions, to do them with ease, is to make sure that you memorize your multiplication facts. And again, like I've told you all before, multiplication facts, multiplication is a life skill. That is something that you're always going to have to know how to do. Adding, subtracting, multiplication, and division. I don't care how old you are, no matter what you do, when you become an adult, what profession you go into, you're always going to have to know how to do one of those four operations. So when you're adding or subtracting fractions, the goal is, the goal is to actually have the denominators be the same. You cannot add or subtract fractions if the denominator is not the same. They have to be the same in order for you to add the numerators. And this is where some of the confusion comes in. How to get them to have the same denominator. So the factors, when we're talking about factors are the numbers that you multiply together to get the product. So the factors, so for instance, 2 times 4. 2 and 4 are the factors. 2 times 4 equals 8. So 2 and 4 are the factors. 8 is the answer, also known as the product. If you've ever done your homework, done an assignment, and it says find the product, they're talking about multiplication. In multiplication, the answer is known as the product. When we're talking about multiples, multiples are the product, the answer of the factors being multiplied. So when, back in the day when we used to count, we would count by fives, count by tens. Now they call it skip counting. That's the same thing as multiples when you're counting 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and so forth. Those are the multiples. Before we knew how to multiply, we would skip count. But once you know how to multiply, the answers are the multiples. So for instance, 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times 4 is 20, and so forth. So you're going to have to know your factors and your multiples. When adding and subtracting fractions, you must know the lowest or the least common denominator. You might hear both of those terms. You may also hear the LCD. That's what that stands for, lowest and least common denominators. Those numbers, that is the least common multiple of those denominators. So for instance, our fractions, we've got 3/5 plus 3/8. So our denominators are 5 and 8. We have to make them the same so that we can add them up. So in this instance, we'll look at the multiples. So if you don't know off the top of your head, you don't know your multiplication facts, it's a good thing what you can do. You can write down the multiples. So let's go over the multiples of 5 because we have to find the lowest common multiple. So let me put this here. Hold on. So with our multiples, the multiples of 5, if you think about skip counting by 5, or if you know your 5 facts, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. So the multiples of 5, and all of those correlate with your 5 multiplication facts. 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, and so forth, okay? Now we have to list our multiples of 8. If you don't know your multiplication facts in your head, you're going to have to write them down so that you can figure out which one is the lowest common multiple. So the multiples of 8. So we start with 8. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. 8 times 5 is 40. And 8 times 6 is 48. So far we've got the multiples of 5 and we've got the multiples of 8. So what we have discovered is that the lowest common multiple of these numbers is 40. There's 40 there for the 5s, the facts, and then there's 40 for the 8s. So our lowest common denominator, our LCD, hello there on Facebook, how are you? Our LCD is going to be 40. So when you're doing your fractions, what you have to do, you're going to have to convert the denominators. In fractions, whatever you do to the denominator, you must do to the numerator. You may hear someone say, whatever you do to the top, you must do to the bottom, or vice versa. So what I usually do, I'll write this over because it usually helps my students when I write it over. And then we begin converting these fractions. So here, our denominator is 5. We have to know what number, when you multiply it times 5, will give you 40. Because our lowest common denominator is 40. So we have to change this to 40, but we have to multiply. So what number, when you multiply it times 5, will give you 40? That number is 8. Because 5 times 8 is 40. So I put a little multiplication, a little x there and an 8 there. And then again, whatever you do to the bottom, the denominator, you must do to the numerator. So we're also going to multiply the 3 by 8. Then we go over here to this fraction, 3/8. So we look at our denominator. Our denominator is an 8. What number do we have to multiply this 8 by in order to convert it to a 40? So if you know your factors, you know your multiplication facts, 8 times 5 is 40. You see here, when we listed the multiples, it's the 5th number. 8 times 5 is 40. So we're going to multiply that 8 by 5. And once again, whatever you do to the bottom, to the denominator, you must do to the top, the numerator. So we're also going to multiply that 3 by 5. So once we multiply, let's rewrite the fraction. Let me move this down a little bit. So 8 times 3 is 24. And then 5 times 8 is 40. So that's our new fraction. We've converted it from 3/5 to 24 over 40. Now we're going to convert it 3/8. We're going to convert that one now. So 3 times 5 is 15. And then 8 times 5 is 40. Okay. So with this one, now we get to add them together. 24 plus 15. And if you have to do it vertically, if adding horizontally doesn't work for you, you can easily just add it vertically if you need to. 24 plus 15. 4 plus 5 is 9. And then 2 plus 1 is 3. So our answer is going to be 39 over 40. That's the answer for this one. So that's how you would add the fractions with unlike denominators. So the next thing we're going to do one that is subtraction. Well, you know what? We can actually, I thought I had another one. Well, we can do this one. Okay. Let me erase this. And then we'll do another one. There are going to be times when you may have a fraction where one fraction you'll have to convert and the other one you may not. So let's see. Oh, and I can erase this.
I can learn to understand you much better if I can get familiar with the way you talk.
So let me delete this and we'll do our next fraction, and this one will be subtraction. And now I'll erase these little lines here. Okay. So the next fraction is going to be 5/16 minus 1/4. Okay. So with this one here, we have a fraction, and of course this one is subtraction. It does not matter when you're doing adding or subtracting fractions. When you're converting the fractions over, you do the same exact process. It's only at the end is it different. It's only at the end will you either add or subtract. Hello there on Facebook. How are you? Thank you for coming in. Please share this out in case you know anyone that needs assistance with fractions, whether they be a student, adolescent, or adult. I appreciate it. So here we have this fraction. Our denominator is 16, 5/16. And then the other one here, the other fraction is 1/4. So once again, we have to find the lowest common denominator. The lowest common denominator is the lowest common multiple. Again, the multiples are the products, the answers of when you've multiplied the factors together. So if you don't know your multiplication facts, you would write your multiples out. You would find, this is how you find the LCD. So the multiples, and you usually list them in numerical order to help you. So the multiples of 4, because we've got a 4, one of our denominators is 4 and one is 16. So the multiples of 4, oh, let me turn my thing on, there we go. The multiples of 4 is 4, because 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16. So we can stop right there because we already see that the other denominator is already a 16. So what we would do in this instance, we would convert this fraction, the 1/4, and we would convert it so that the denominator is 16, and then that way, since they'll both be 16, then we can go ahead and do our subtraction. So once again, I always write this over for my students because it helps them if they see it step by step. And again, when we're converting fractions, you have to multiply the the denominator by the factor in order to make it 16. So we already said here our LCD is going to be 16. So we have to multiply 4 by the factor that will turn this into 16. And remember, whatever you do to the bottom, to the denominator, you do to the top, the numerator. That's how this works. So you know your multiplication facts. If you know them, you would know what number do you multiply 4 by to turn it into 16. You can multiply it by 4 because 4 times 4 is 16. So whatever you do to the denominator, you do to the numerator. So we're going to do the same thing with the 1. We're going to also multiply our 1 by 4. And again, because 5/16, this is already has a 16 here, which is our LCD, our lowest common denominator. We leave this particular fraction as is. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. So we'll just write this one over, 5/16, and then we'll multiply. 1 times 4 is going to be 4. That's our new numerator. And then 4 times 4 is 16. That's our new denominator. And so now both of our denominators are 16. Now we can subtract. So of course 5 minus 4 is 1. And then the denominator is going to be the same, 16. So we have 1/16. And that completes our review of adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So I hope this helped someone. I hope this made a lot of sense. Just take your time, work through the steps, and you'll be fine doing fractions. And I'll be back tomorrow, same time, with another lesson on fractions. So have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.